Greetings everybody, Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of a new series covering Memoriapolis. If you would like to skip the game's overview or the setup of the scenario, please use YouTube chapters. Welcome everybody to a new series covering Memoriapolis, or something, I'm not exactly sure how to say it. It is a game where you found and build a city that spans 2,500 years of history. Little asterisk that in this early access state, it's not 4 ages, it's only 2, so it's half that. From Antiquity to the Age of Enlightenment, but currently it's really until the age of late Middle Ages. You choose your culture, manage resources, face historical events, build wonders, and leave your mark on history. The game feels to me like if you took one of the cities from Civilization, like Civilization 5, and zoomed in, and to a much more detailed level, and crafted that city as its governor. The way that civilization spans multiple ages, well, this is about not a whole civilization, but an individual city. So it's very granular in that way. This stream is going to be a mix of Let's Play and tutorial, and I'll be playing Classic mode. So currently there's a Classic and an Endless mode. Classic is when you like advance through the ages and are given quests and all that, and Endless mode is kind of like open. And I'm going to be starting on a recommended map tile, and that will be explained to you in a moment. And the starting factions are going to be determined by popular vote. So let's do that now. There are 5 factions in the game, and the starting faction that you choose isn't necessarily the only faction that you use. But there is the craftsmen. So the craftsmen are given more access to abundant natural resources. You've got the traders, where the trade caravans produce passive income when they're running. You have your strategists that decrease the likelihood of negative occurrences, like fires, crimes, revolts, and disease outbreaks. You have a politician, which allows you to issue more political decrees and reduces the cost of said political decrees. You've got your philosopher, which the culture buildings offer more satisfaction to keep the populace happy. And then the priest, where they dedicate their lives to others, and the population makes regular offerings to them of random resources. So those are the 4 factions. And you guys are going to vote on that while I finish up reading the details. I am going to be playing very slowly and casually, because the game only includes the first 2 ages, which, if you play quickly, you can easily reach within a few hours. So I'm intentionally playing slow so that in one given stream, I don't end the game too quickly. And if you have any questions, use the channel point redemption. So it looks to me like we are going to initially go with Strategist by a small margin. So here is where you can create your city's name and your leader's name. And unlike normal, where like I would name it Yodaville and my leader would be Yoda, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Because we're a strategist, this coat of arms kind of makes sense. Maybe I'll have it look more defensive, I suppose, but I like it. Crossed swords and all. Good. Maybe make it gold? Yeah, let's make it gold. At the start of the game, this map is not procedurally generated, but there is multiple starting locations. And there are 2 recommended starter locations, Riverside and Roadside. I'm going to have you choose between the 2, and I'm going to explain how this works. Where to settle, Riverside, Roadside. So, initially, the natural resources that you're going to need access to are trees or wood, which is this wooded area. You're going to want clay, and clay exists sometimes in the marshes, like here, sometimes on the coastlines, sometimes in the mountains, and you're also going to want stone, which almost exclusively comes from the rugged mountainous terrain. But as time develops, in the same way that in Civilization, as you tech up, you discover more natural resources. So if you're playing Civilization, you know, and you get to the Bronze Age, where you discover like tin and copper, it will start to appear. The same is true of this game, where you don't know where the higher level resources are until you reach a technological level to be able to exploit and use them. So between these two choices, Riverside's over here. Riverside has a road running to its east. It has a sandy bank. It's got a bridge. It has this sort of like mountainous crater to the west and mountains to the north, and then this green and wooded pasture to the south. And then for Roadside. Roadside doesn't have close access to sand. It does have this small pond to the east. It has fewer mountains, but a lot more woods. So in this being a preset map, it's also worth mentioning that there are bounds. So as you can see, you can only go so far. So when you're picking a spot, if you pick a spot that's near the edge of the map, like let's say River Estuary up here, you can't go and develop the land beyond the map boundary. So you have to pick wisely. But it looks like you guys want Riverside, so let's pick that. And the first thing that we do is set down an ancient camp. And I'm going to be going through the game's tutorial slowly as I play. One warning I will give you right off the bat here is, see those symbols around the ancient camp? Those sort of like circles with like with a diamond in them? Those are road networks. And the reason this is really important is, at least for now, when you construct a road, you cannot deconstruct a road. As far as I know. I could be wrong, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And the reason I mention this is because if you are laying out roads poorly, if you're putting down your buildings without a concept of where the road is going to be, you're going to end up with a civilization full of like awkward roads kind of everywhere, blocking you from being able to develop well. So, you can't remove roads if you crawl correctly. You saw in another video? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, see how the symbols line up with the pre-existing roads? If I place the ancient camp here, the northeast section will create a road and the southeast section will create a road. So I'm just saying, like, be careful how you lay out your roads, because you can really screw yourself. And you might want to have to do like a save scum revert. So I'm going to stick it right here in the middle of where it's recommended. Actually a little bit higher, so that it's a bit more flat around it. And this is the start of Antiquity. Your family has made this fertile and welcoming land its own. Feel free to decide your own destiny. This is the beginning of your dynasty. Starting with a single camp, you'll have to develop an autonomous city that harvests its own resources, boasts a flourishing economy, and attracts other citizens to survive the ages. The goal? To make this future city one of the most important in the world. But be warned, your time is running out. Chapter 1. Organizing your city. So this is the box in the top right. The village is gradually becoming independent. New families are settling in, but we're going to have to start organizing to prevent the central square from becoming a place of chaos. Improving the town center would make it more official and respected. So my first goal is to get the prerequisites to upgrade the city center to level 2. And if we click on it, as you can see, there's a lot going on here. I'll explain it in a second. But the goal is essentially to get 106 wood, 44 stone, and 90 total population. In order to analyze the UI, let me go over this real quick. I know it's not the most interesting. At the top, you have your resources. So initially, it's only resources that we are using. So it's food, which is grown in farms, wood, and if you scroll over it, as you can see, you see where the natural resources of wood are, which is obviously the wooded areas, stone, and the stone lines up with the mountainous regions, clay. And clay is going to be important because clay is a lot less abundant than stone, so you're going to have to seek out the clay, and I'll get into that in a bit. Sand, and as you can see, sand is by the riverside and sometimes pond sides. And then precious stones aren't really going to be a factor for a long time. We have gold. We have blueprints, which is something that you use to unlock more buildings. You've got inhabitants, workers, and wanderers. We have our crest here. And then this is cultural points, which will come into play soon. Before I go any further, Scorpio, thank you for all the gifted subs. And everybody else for the resubs. Passenger, Krusty Rhino, Talk More, Bloody Death. Cheers. All right, a little bit more of the commands. On the bottom left here, we have the cultural radiance. I'll get into that in a bit. And the building tech tree. And then down below is your construction. So the first thing that we're going to want to do in order to have an independent city is to lay out farmland, lay out cutting camps to increase our wood, and lay out a small quarry to increase our stone. One thing that's really important to note is I don't have income. So if we waste resources and use them poorly, you kind of lose immediately. Now, another really interesting thing about this game is that the houses develop around your ancient camp. And the ancient camp has a security area of 300 meters. So this circle here is my building limit. And for the most part, except for like 2 individual buildings, nothing can be built outside of this area. And it also has an attraction zone. So attraction is where people like to live. So if we open up the filter overlay in the top right here, it is most attractive around the ancient camp. People want to live near the ancient camp. And then it's also worth noting that farms, cutting camps, and quarries are not attractive places to live near. So herein lies the initial problem. We want to set up a cutting camp and a small quarry, but it shouldn't be close to the ancient camp. So although the tutorial really hasn't directed me to do this just yet, I'm going to go kind of ahead of it. But before I do that, there is this also controls tutorial. So you have WSD movement, mouse wheel for zooming in and out, and then you can rotate with right mouse button. Pretty standard stuff. And then this is explaining the safety zone. So the security area is a circular boundary around your city center. With few exceptions, buildings cannot be built beyond them. Improving the level of the city or building surveyor cabins or wonders allows you to expand it. Classic resources like food, wood, stone, clay, sand. And building attractions. People like attractive buildings and do not like unattractive areas. So, here's what we're going to do. I am going to set up some survey camps. So in the tech, this is the tech tree. And the tech tree is split up to production buildings. So at the moment, that would be a cutting camp, a small farm, and a small quarry. And these can be upgraded. And they even have forking choices for the cutting camp and the small quarry. There's cultural buildings I don't have unlocked yet. There's proximity buildings, which is the surveyor camp. And if we click on it, as you can see, it has a neutral attraction. So it's not ugly to live near. And I am going to buy it. And this costs 0 blueprints. So it's kind of a freebie. Perfect. And then there's Service and Wonder, and we don't have those unlocked either. So in the Proximity tab, we now have the Surveyor's Camp. And as you can see, I can build a Surveyor's Camp to expand my sphere of influence. It's also worth noting you can't build it on mountains, and you can't build it deep in the woods. So you have to plan accordingly. So we had mentioned that the resources that I want to acquire pretty early on is wood, stone, clay. So let's consider. If we mouse over the clay overlay, as you can see, there's a lot of clay right here. So getting access to this specific area would be great. There's also sand in this pond over here. So getting access to this area would satisfy sand and clay. And then there is, of course, stone in that area too. Stone is a lot more abundant. So this, settling out to the west, would satisfy all those needs. However, this leads nowhere. This is the edge of the map. So if there's a better direction to go to, like to the north, that might be more fruitful in the long run. Because what you can do with these surveyor camps, although currently I only have 2 of them, so it might not be wise to do right now, is once you put one surveyor camp down, you can daisy chain the next one. So you can keep chaining them together to get sort of like tendrils of spheres of influence out from your city center. But because trying to get into this clay is just simply a little bit too far, I'm going to go for the western clay as it is way more easy to obtain. Now, the other thing I mentioned is make sure that you're careful about how you place roads. So if I want roads, let's say from this road here, I'll put my surveyor camp up like that. And it will create a road that cuts through the woods rather than filling up this area. And I'm going to unpause the game now with the time controls on the bottom right, or spacebar, and wait for that surveyor's camp to be built. So the surveyor's camp itself only costs 10 wood, 10 stone, and a cutting camp costs 10 stone, and a small quarry costs 10 wood. So given that, I'm able to build both of the surveyor's camps and still afford at least a cutting camp and a small quarry, which is important, because if you run out of those resources, you'll have to destroy your infrastructure to be able to actually continue building. Now, it's also worth noting that you can unlock the upgraded version of a surveyor's camp, which is here, but this upgraded version requires a resource called rubbles to be able to build, which I don't know how to make that. So there's really no point in upgrading to the next tier surveyor's camp because it requires a resource I am unaware of how to produce. Whereas the cutting camps increase just requires more stone, the small quarry just increases more wood, and the upgraded farm, more wood. So I could consider unlocking the upgrades for the basic production facilities, but there's no point in upgrading my surveyor's camp just yet. And there we go. So that surveyor's camp is done. And if I take a look at the overlay here, if I put a quarry here, it will have access to clay. So I don't necessarily need to create another surveyor's camp to go even further westward. I'm going to put my quarry here. And what I want to do is I want to put the quarry down somewhere where it's going to have the least effect on the trees. So this quarry here, you know, actually, come to think of it, I should probably collect stone first. So taking a look, there's a lot of stone, kind of in both directions. So maybe what I'll do is I'll put the quarry up here to collect stone. Even though clay is more abundant. So we'll build that and gather stone. And then I want a cutting camp. And I want to build a cutting camp as far away from the town center as possible so that it isn't an eyesore. So I'll put it up here. And the road connects there. So that will satisfy the stone and the wood. It will not, however, satisfy my need for farming. Now, it's entirely possible for me to drop like a farm here. My only worry with that is it will fill up this area with farm fields. And if I did that, I might lose access to the sand that's over here. So when planning out a farm, I might want to go in a different direction. So instead of dropping my farm up here, I can either head south to this open field and a lot of woods, or north. Either way is fine, and I'm going to poll you guys. So which way to expand? Give you 2.5 minutes to vote on that, because it's not urgent that I produce food just yet. So here is how the houses develop. This is what is called a district, and these districts are going to be filled with citizens as they develop. So like this district has housing for 18 citizens, and this district only has housing for 2. They're automatically generated. I can't really control them all that much, and they populate where it is most attractive. So if we take a look at the attraction overlay, as you can see, it's most attractive around our ancient camp. So of course they're going to settle there. And you can see that these districts don't have a specific culture that they belong to. And then this is my like controlled sphere of influence, where you can see all the specific housing. Can I show the resource map in both locations? Sure. So to the south, we have tons and tons of woods. There is stone in the western hills. There is clay down here in this kind of boggy marsh. And there is sand along the coast. To the north, there's a lot more stone. There's less woods. There's a bit of clay up here in this, on this hillside. And there's sand, but only around this pond. It's also worth noting that, like, well, I don't want to get into that. Never mind. I'll hold my tongue. It's a bit of a spoiler. Okay, we now have a small quarry, quarrying up stone, and a cutting camp, cutting down trees for wood. And that means we have an income of both of these resources. And it looks like team... Well, you still have a little bit more time left to vote. 20 more seconds, but it's like pretty neck and neck. It's also worth noting that as the ancient camp progresses, I will also obtain more surveyor cabins. So I'm not limited to just the 2. I will get more of them over time. I just only have access to 2 for now. Okay, Team South by like a vote. Alright, I'm going to put the Surveyor's Camp hugging the road as much as I can so that I don't fill the valley with roads. And there it goes. Almost in coin toss territory. I don't have my, like, Oblivion coin, but I do have some quarters. I was teaching my kid currency, so I've got quarters right over there if I had a coin toss. Alright, with this surveyor camp, let's set up a farm. So I think, given that there is a lot of stone in these hills, the first thing I want to do is set up another quarry. And I'm going to stick the quarry here. And then I'm going to try to set up another cutting camp. Now this cutting camp doesn't have perfect access to woods, but I'm not worried about that just yet. So here's a second quarry and a second cutting camp. I like to at least start with 2 of each. And then, now that that's being developed, I will build farms. So I'm going to put a farm here. And when you build a farm, each field has its own construction time and number of workers. So you can build a farm that only has 1 field, or you can build a farm that has up to 12 fields. I'm going to maximize the amount of fields that I have, because your farm building to field ratio, the more fields that you have, the better. Because every farm requires this central building, which takes up space. So it's more space efficient to just have mega farms. Alright. Some of the questions being asked. How much do you need to future-proof your cities? Not too much. The game is not overly difficult as long as you know where the pitfalls are to avoid them. And is your city a part of the kingdom? No. This is an Antiquity time. We're talking like it is something like 600 BCE. So there isn't like the concept of like kingdoms and territories yet. We're a city-state. So we're very much in city-statehood. Several cycles have passed, and you now have enough citizens and resources in your houses to improve your town center. This upgrade will give you access to larger building area. So anytime that pops up, your ancient camp can be developed. It's also worth noting that the ancient camp also controls the total amount of stocks you have. So if you look up here, my food reserves, my wood, my stone, my clay is all being stored in the ancient camp. And we're going to improve the ancient camp. So this will increase the security radius of the ancient camp by 50 meters and increase the attraction. Done. The people have their own fields and gardens. The citizens do not. No. These fields are just like fields. They're not food producing. The only food producing would be coming out of the small farm. And in a minute here, you'll see the small farm develop. So here, as you can see, there's a field being automatically developed and linking to the small farm. And my food quantity is getting low, but the fields are coming up soon enough that we'll be fine. So you can see the farm generates automatic fields. You now have access to cultural buildings: ceramic workshop, arena, Esculapium, Agage Center, Via Edificium, and Forum. You now have access to production building, architectural office. You can now access your citizens' satisfactions: health, safety, belonging, esteem, and creativity. These have an effect on migration, and therefore on the number of people wishing to join your town. Each satisfaction provides bonuses or penalties, so be careful not to neglect them. So I will go over that now. On the bottom right here, we have the satisfaction menu. So we started off with the Strategist, which is the faction that is dedicated towards safety, but I'm going to go through them top to bottom. So we have health, and when health is being satisfied, food consumption decreases by 15%, and construction times are reduced by 20%. When safety is satisfied, the reduction of incidents, negative incidents, is decreased by 15%, and city migration is increased by 20%. The next one is belonging. Faction trust lost reduced by 20%, and faction tax rate increased by 20%. Then you have esteem, which decree duration is increased and resource production is increased. And you have then creativity. Blueprint production is increased by the generation of cultural points. And we'll get into the cultural points once they're unlocked. Bottom of the buildings tree, at the bottom left of the screen, click the tab and buy blueprints. Town center marks the beginning of each age. Depending on its geographical position, it may offer easier access to various resources or a larger building area. The satisfaction log details the effects of each satisfaction, which I just went over. So, one of the first buildings I want to build is the architectural office, which produces blueprints and also generates attraction. And it comes free, so that works for me. So the architectural office here is an attractive building, and that's important to note because people want to live near it. So if we take a look at the attraction overlay here, if I build the architectural office out here, I might be able to encourage the development of new settlements eastward. And that's exactly what I intend to do, because I don't want these houses to get too close to the industrial mountains. Eastward is a much better direction for them to develop. Alright, and then Chapter 2, Producing Culture. Your town expands, cycle after cycle. Inhabitants begin to group together, and the first districts are formed. From now on, you'll be asked to erect cultural buildings representing the city's various specializations. Some of these buildings may be just the thing to satisfy the population. The first step is to find out which buildings to build and why. Does the river affect satisfaction? It does not. Oh, and I missed a dog treat like a long time ago. Sorry about that. So open up the blueprints here. I now have access to the cultural buildings. So we started off as strategists, but we're not necessarily bound to only build military buildings. So the ceramics workshop primarily satisfies health, military for safety, religion for belonging, the Agage Center for creativity, the commercial building for, health, and the forum for esteem. And because we are starting off as strategists, I am going to unlock the arena. That will be the first thing I build. But after that, I will have you guys decide what to build next. So we have unlocked the arena, and now, once I have 125 wood and 17 free workers, we can construct the arena. And it has a positive influence on safety satisfaction. Alright, and then there's an optional quest in the top right, an attractive land. New residents will prefer to live in an attractive location and nearby centers of interest. While some environments may repel them, others may charm them. So open up the attraction overlay, which is here. And then the next optional goal is to produce attractive zones, which, once this architectural office is built, I've done exactly that. Hopefully this farm... I think this farm is catching up to our food demands fast enough. I think what I'm going to do is build a second farm anyway. And I'm going to place it here. That is going to slow down the time it will take for me to build an arena, because a lot of the people that were unemployed are now going to be working in the farms, not free to work in the arena. Does that overlap the other farming zone? So this farming zone is the total area of its malice disturbances. It isn't its sphere of influence. So no, this isn't a problem at all. It's basically the smell and the noise of the farm overlapping, which, if anything, is ideal to keep it away from people. Alright, we need only 2 more workers. We're at right now 15 of the 17 required for an arena. Now, my only worry about this farm is that the farmland is converting the woods into farm fields, and it's making it so that the cutting camp has fewer access to wood resources, so we might have to break down this cutting camp and move it at some point. But that's not that big of a deal. And here's the arena. So, when you mouse over, you can see little boxes pop up. What these little boxes are, is these boxes represent the potential faction influence that a building will incur. So if I build an arena here, these 2 districts here, and I'll open up the district overlay so you can see it more easily. These districts will become strategic districts. Moving a little bit further, it's not really in spoiler territory because it's going to become really relevant really quickly. Districts that have different faction influences will also potentially have rivalries, and in so sort of distrust. So a lot of the development of this game is trying to develop all of the factions and to avoid all of the infighting that will occur. You can, if you want, only build buildings of one specific faction, but if you choose to go that route, for instance, we're the Strategists faction. Building only Strategist buildings, it might become very challenging to satisfy the populace's need for, let's say, creativity, or belonging, or esteem, or health. So you have to make some tough decisions at times. But I'm going to choose to build the arena here. Again, trying to influence them to develop eastward. Now, the first arena of your reign has been built. Choose the additional satisfaction on which the building should take effect. The value will be fixed for each occurrence of arena. So essentially what it's saying is the arena will provide safety, but it can also provide optionally 1 extra. So health reduces the consumption of food and building construction time. Belonging increases the impacts of trust gain or losses between factions. I am going to focus on belonging as a secondary satisfaction. Because if we're doing a multi-factioned settlement or multi-faction city, preventing lost trust between factions will help different factions that are rivaling to get along better. Also in the bottom right here, as you can see, these satisfactions have dipped a bit. So I know it's hard to read, but for instance, for safety, I have 114 citizens who are satisfied and 57 who are not. So these are color-coded, and they'll go from dark green to light green to gray to like orange to red, red being the most dire. So our food problem never bottomed out, which is good. The next thing I want to build, once I have the resources, or people, is a quarry for clay. And potentially working towards sand as well. I'd like to start collecting all of the raw resources sooner than later. Now, when we developed our ancient camp to level 2, we also unlocked 2 more surveyors camps. Which direction to expand? I could go south. Let's do north, west, south, or east. The cardinal directions. So to the north, we have stone initially. We have this really open pasture for like additional settlement and development. We have sand and we have clay. To the east, we have a bridge, and then the bridge leads to very dense wooded areas, which is hard to build in, but very resource-rich, with some clay up top, and then sand all along the coast. If we went west, there's not much further west we could go, but we could unlock access to this pond area for sand and clay, more clay if we wanted. To the south, we could just gain a little bit more access to these deep wooded areas so that we could cut down more trees. And then to the north, or to the, yeah, that's all the directions. So I'll give you 2.5 minutes to vote on that. Is it possible to repurpose a big quarry if the resources got empty? Yes. So if we mine up all of the stone, I'm going to be given an option to switch the types of resources it exploits. Chapter 3, Rewards. You now have access to service buildings, the Horium and the Macellum. The Horium offers numerous reserve slots, allowing for the city's various production buildings to be managed more efficiently. Basically, it's a warehouse or storehouse. And the Macellum allows trade routes. So, in Chapter 4, Shaping Districts. Construction completed. Many citizens would like to live in adjacent districts, as this building provides a certain cultural input. This allows residents to be unified under specific codes and values. The more shared the values, the more peaceful your reign, unless a rich diversity brings more benefits. So I was talking about this. If we take a look at our districts now, here's our districts maps, and these are military culture districts because they are adjacent to the arena, but they are without factions. So what ends up happening is they will be influenced by the cultural buildings that you build. And then over time, factions will be formalized where they become political groups, if you will. And you have 4 or 5 different types. You have military, religious, education, commerce, and political. And we can decide whether to focus only on military or to diversify between multiple factions. So I'm going to give you that choice as well. Districts are non-destructible groupings of houses formed in the most attractive areas. If they are tinged with culture, they will become cultural districts and may host a faction. And the goal is to create 4 cultural districts. I'm also given access to a new building, the Statue of the Founders, and it costs clay and sand, which I don't have yet. So we're going to want some clay and sand. So let's go get some clay. There we go. And then for sand... sand's a little challenging, but it looks like you guys want me... Ooh, it's a tie? I've got a coin. Heads will be north, and tails will be the east. It is tails. Whoops. Best not drop the coin. So we are going to be settling eastward. What is that? I do not know what that line is. That is a bug. That's my district going wild. Maybe I'll do a quick save and load. Just to try to get rid of that weird pixel glitch. Nope, it didn't go away. Okay, that's fine. Well, east is going to be useful because east gives me access to the sand. So I will make good use of that. What cultural building do we build next? So I'm going to give you the options. So here's the blueprints. I could build a... Let's do production. Military. So production would be craftsman. Military would be strategists. Religion would be priest. Education would be philosopher. And then commercial would be traders. and forum would be political. So if we build something other than military, we welcome in the advent of other factions. So it is up to you. It's also worth noting in the on the bottom right that I have a neutral fulfillment for health, for esteem and creativity, but belonging and safety are being satisfied. So as you can see, if I keep building only military buildings, safety will obviously be very easy to satisfy, but the other 4 are going to be difficult to satisfy as a result of like kind of the imbalance. Thank you for tuning in to Memoriapolis, which originally streamed live on Twitch September 11th. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you would like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, my fellow residents of Memoriapolis.